You guys, welcome to an all new episode of So Bad It's Good with Ryan Bailey. This is your pal Ryan, and I think this is going to be your Tuesday episode. This is a little late, and I'll explain why this is late, unfortunately. Which by the way, how are you guys good? Man, that I got to tell you, maybe we shouldn't do 3-day weekends. I feel like they really throw you off for the actual week because you have this like kind of low grade depression where you're like, oh God, because 3-day weekends, it's almost a little too nice where you get used to it. And then each day of that 3-day weekend, one day passes and you're like, that's fine. I got 2 more days left. And then the second day passes and you're like, that's fine. I got 1 more day left. And then the night of that third day, you're literally pulling your hair out and wondering how you can do 4 or 5-day weekends, which is just not possible. That's also the other thing I think about rich people, especially in pop culture. It's, like the J-Los and stuff where you can just tell rich doesn't mean anything to them because they want to keep going. They want to keep building. And I think that's probably why I'm not rich and famous, because I think I would get to a certain point and be like, that's good for this life. I'm good. Hey, I don't need, I'd prefer to just have 4-day weekends for the rest of my life instead of continually pushing and building. Oh, you guys. Anyways, so listen, you guys know how big of a fan of The Valley I am on Bravo on its first season. And I talked about this on Monday's episode, and I mentioned this to the Patreon, was that Janet Elizabeth or Janet Caperna was going to come on the show. So she did come on the show. We did this interview last night, Monday night. And at first I was like, oh, I'll release this on Tuesday. But then we talked about this week's episode of The Valley that is airing tonight and said, oh, okay, well, we're talking about this. So we can't, I can't put this out on Tuesday because we're talking about things that the audience hasn't seen yet. And then we're like, okay, we'll put it out Wednesday. Now, the interview itself, awesome, so fun. You guys know, I know Janet from before this. So it's been interesting, and it was a really like so many laughs. But we really, we got to talk about a lot of stuff. We got to talk about the reaction to Jax's new lady friend that he debuted this weekend. Talked about Brittany, talked about her, got to talk about her past, how she met Sheena. We kind of went through the gamut. It was a really loose, fun interview, but I also want to point out positive. It wasn't negative. It wasn't, I kept it civil, as, that's kind of who I like to be. And if you come on this show, it's not like it's going to be like, where were you on the night of August 13th? It's more of a conversation that I want people leaving feeling good about, like the guest and the listener. And especially, you're trying to make the guest feel good about their decision to give you and your audience time. And you're trying to find answers, and you can do a little bit of pushback, sure, but it's not at a point, and especially, there are certain shows where they can get away with more, and I'm always very probably too aware of that, of your place in the food chain, as it were. And listen, we are, it's weird to think about this show over the years, and, it really has come such a long way. I mean, such a long way, so much so that I forget. But you do have to remind yourself, like, oh wow, look, we are really one of the top shows, one of the bigger shows in terms of this kind of content, and that's really exciting. But what I think happens then, in my mind at least, is that just like we were talking about J-Lo, it's never enough. Like, I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm never going to be like, okay. Like, it's always going to be something else, or the interview that you didn't get, or the interview you did get, but you didn't feel like you did good enough, or the recap that you didn't feel was funny enough, or too long on a recap. There's always things to beat yourself up about. And I am so good. I've got a master's degree in beating myself up. Anywho, wake up early today because I went and did Jeff Lewis over on Sirius. What up, chumps? If you're listening, which was a blast. I got to do it with Sarah Colonna. So much fun. But Janet in the morning was like, hey, could you send me that, the audio file? I just want to, there was one part we talked about. She was like, maybe take this part out, which it was a great part, but I was like, okay, yeah, check it out. And then she had mentioned it, I guess, to PR. So this was done through Janet. Because, like I said, we do text every now and then. So this was done through us, but it wasn't any kind of sneaky thing. And then I think PR, I don't know if it was Bravo PR or her actual, it was probably Bravo PR. Now I can't release it. I can't release it. And it's not because I don't think anything was too damning in it, because like I said, it was a fairly positive, fun, funny interview. But they don't have time to listen to it, and we might have to re-record it entirely next week. And that's a huge bummer, not because of anything Janet did or anything Bravo did. It's just a huge bummer because you're like, oh, that I was going to release that Tuesday right after the Valley aired. And then I'm like, okay. And it's just one of those things. Like, it's always something, right? It's always something. And I didn't get really great sleep last night. So I'm in just that kind of woe is me. And then you realize it's ridiculous because at the end of the day, you're talking about things like Vanderpump Rules in the Valley. Like this is, you know, it, but it is frustrating because the show, you do put a lot of work in, and then if one thing falls out of place, it's like these dominoes where everything kind of like just starts dropping. And it's frustrating because you're like, oh man, this would have been great to release, and it was so good, and we had this, we talked about this, and we talked about that, and if we do it again, who knows what that'll be. And then obviously somebody will be on the line listening to us, like the PR person, so who knows what they'll let leave in. And this was like it was like an hour plus interview, which is the other thing. Because that's the other thing too, is that you interview these people, Bravo celebrities or regular celebrities, just regular celebrities, celebrities. And it's something, if you're like a David Letterman or a Howard Stern or a Chelsea Handler or an Oprah Winfrey or like all of, they've built this career where at this point, people trust them. People would kill to speak to them, and they're able to ask questions and get to the heart of the matter so much easier because they already have this respect and popularity established. So they're able to get some of the best interviews that you can possibly give, because the interview subject wants to give as much as they can because they usually respect the interviewer. And that's why it's hard sometimes to come from, and this is not just me, I would imagine any content creator that does what I do feels this way at times, is that it's sometimes this uphill battle. And you got to have a real strong belief in yourself. I don't know. It's not that, because I don't necessarily believe in myself, but I just really like doing this. It just makes sense to me in some way, like, there's certain things you can see yourself doing and certain things that you can't. Like, I couldn't see myself, being an athlete. It's just that I can't see myself doing it, wouldn't have any joy in it, but I can see myself doing this, in your mind's eye. You can visualize. Do you have that with your lives where you're like, oh yeah, like the thing that you do really well, or that you think you could do, it just wasn't a thing. You're like, yeah, I could do that. But then there's other aspects of your life where you're like, there's just no effing way. There's no effing way. I wouldn't even think about it. It doesn't even stress me out because I don't even think about it. Wouldn't be a possibility. So, yeah, so we'll find out. I think we'll have to redo the interview. I'm not going to be able to release it, which sucks because it's not like, holy shit, you just let every secret out. No, it wasn't like that. It's not how I approach things anyways, because I am always looking to try to be respectful and also be aware that I do love Bravo, so there is no way I want to damage any of these shows, or anything like that. So I always try to keep it respectful, but I do think, I do have to wonder, in terms of the show, thinking out loud, is where we do go from here. I'm not, nor do I want to be or need to be, the Heather McDonald or the Nick Vialli, or, where it's like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think that's what I've just kind of been thinking the last couple of hours of, where do we go with this show? I have a lot of ideas, and by the way, I love that I say, like, this sounds like it's ending, because it's not. We're doing the best that we've ever done, but it is that thing of, well, where can we go? Can we go any further? Can we go, there's the thought of live shows. There's the thought of, I don't know. I don't know. So many questions. So anyways, I just wanted to let you know, because I had put up on my Instagram, holding the show for a guest, which that was the initial plan. And then things got turned around today. So I wanted to just tell you this. And then I was like, okay, well, what do we talk about? because I'm going to do the Valley recap for tonight's episode, and that'll come out tomorrow on Wednesday. But what do I put out today then? What do I put out? And we can talk about pop culture stories. Sure. I was just let you know what was happening on my end. But I also think I do want to talk a little bit, and I left this out purposely of Monday's episode because it seemed like it was kind of a developing story or something that I was trying to get a handle on, and that is Joseph. Joe. Schwartz's Joe. And Joe was on the Rachel Goes Rogue podcast last week. And for the people that do listen every day, who predicted that that would happen again? I did. In fact, I actually took it a step further, and I think eventually you will see a Joe and Rachel podcast, and you will definitely see Joe probably start her own podcast at some point. But I wanted to go through the transcript that I got of this podcast and talk a little bit about Rachel in terms of this season of Vanderpump Rules. Now, tonight's episode of Vanderpump Rules it's the finale, baby. We are at the third part of the reunion, and I wanted to play this clip for you because I think it enraged a lot of us. It came out today, and I just thought this obviously this clip takes place after they make the cast watch the final 5 minutes of the episode. And in those final 5 minutes, remember, Lala's like, beep, beep, beep. This bitch thinks she's Beyonce. I've never seen somebody get cheated on and then they become God. And you have Sheena agreeing with Lala, and just seems to be a mess. It seems to be a mess. So this is the clip that got released today to warm you up for tonight. Just get a load of this. We're going to listen to the audio together as a family.
I was livid that night. Livid. And I'm sorry if I hurt you, but I stand by what I said.
Damn.
And I probably didn't say it the most eloquently, but this was days and days of me. I was sobbing on a regular basis. I love filming with you guys, even when you up and I want to torture you off.
You're saying you felt let down by everybody because the true story that you were getting wasn't the true story they were filming.
It was difficult because I understood where Ariana was coming from, but I was like, why does she get to dictate how this goes down when I've never gotten to dictate?
What is your response to this?
I don't think I'm Beyonce. I don't think I'm God. Talking about sobbing on a regular basis, yeah, I don't do it in front of Sheena. I do it on my own. And arguably, if you want to talk in show terms, me walking away from that conversation was a lot more interesting than me sitting there and having it. Was that not a better ending to your season to give you another season for another paycheck?
Oh, boom! Damn, Ariana dropping the anvil. Now, we get a couple of things from that clip, and we will talk about that, of course, obviously, when we do the full breakdown on Thursday, is you get, man, it's what, first off, it's great. It's not great, but watching Ariana and Lala try to stop the tear coming out of their eye with their fingers. You know, they don't have the cry angle like Candace did with Real Housewives of Potomac. So they're putting their fingers under their eyes, trying to stop the juices from flowing because they are fully glammed up. And that's always interesting to see of two people, like the waterworks are starting and they're trying to stop the waterworks. But then on top of that, we finally now are getting into it of what we see here. Remember, is the prequel of then Lala going out and doing a full court press in terms of PR, like landing on every show. She did Jeff Lewis. Like I said, you know, she did every show going like, oh, it went down. I'm just going to tell you. And I think it is fascinating and very Lala to double and triple down, even in the moment of saying, I don't regret anything that I said and this and that. And Ariana coming back quickly and very realistically. And I think that's why Ariana, you know, for the majority of people really like her this season and really admire how she's kind of maneuvered and handled this entire situation and says like, yes, I don't cry in front of Sheena, which is almost kind of a little dig of like, I'm not going to let her see that, but I do it myself privately, which is what a lot of us do, right? And then also throwing it back in Lala's face of like, do you think it was interesting enough me walking out? That could get you another paycheck for another season, Lala. Because like I said, the thing that's frustrating about Lala is she makes it painfully obvious you are watching a reality show. Like she's like, oh, I love working with you guys. I love shooting, even when you screw up. I don't want to think of you as an actor. I don't want to think of you, and this is like another season of Game of Thrones, and you're really liking your scene partners, even though some of them don't memorize their lines. Like, I don't want to think about it like that. I want to think about that you are fully engaged, that you are telling your truth, not the show's truth, your truth. And I think, like I say till I'm blue in the face now, that is the awkwardness that we feel with this show, because you have certain people living their life or trying to and making decisions predicated on that life. And then you have people like Lala that are trying to, I think, and I'm giving her an easy out here, of trying to save the show, that she must have been made to feel like the show needed to be saved. How does a show need to be saved when it's the hottest it's ever been? This show all of a sudden became the hottest reality show on the market based off a real event. So how all of a sudden do we need to save a show that is the hottest it's ever been? You wouldn't even know what you're saving or why you were saving it and what you're looking for. And the thing is, that's why you really need, and I think, like, I'm so curious. That's why it's like frustrating to talk about this show, because you want producers to jump in, because you want to hear their take on it, because you want to believe that they know exactly what they're doing. So they don't need yayas like blah, blah, like Lala out there giving her own take on things. Because I don't think necessarily when you're that close to something, when you're in it like that, you sometimes don't have a 360 view of exactly how to, you don't see everything. So for Lala to try to act like she has this producer's vision when she's too close to it for that, I don't think she necessarily understands what makes this show work or what really excites the fans. Now, there is that argument, like I said last week, is, well, maybe they just like to keep us mad. Maybe that's it, because I'm out here yelling about it. Other people are out there yelling about it. We'll be yelling about it for the next couple of days before we find something else new to yell about. Maybe it'll be Northwest at the Hollywood Bowl playing Simba. Who knows? We'll always find something to yell about. But I also want to take time, and what I love to do on the show is to celebrate things. Like even Ariana, in that moment where she sees some people kind of not, maybe not betray her directly, but really say things that are so negative and hurtful towards one's person and a situation that was done to them. And to really see claws come out over a situation that she can't necessarily control is got to be insanely hurtful in that moment. And for her to keep composed and be able to say things and clock it in a very real way of like, you're talking about a paycheck, Lala. Don't you think it's more interesting to watch me walk out than actually have a fake scene with Tom Sandoval? Don't you think we can save your paycheck another way? Like I said, I don't want to watch a show where I'm watching, like, I don't watch a Vanderpump Rules. Hey, Vanderpump Rules. Does Lala keep her job? Like, that's not what the show title is. I legitimately don't want to have to worry about these people and have them see them worry on screen if they are going to get paid for another year. To me, that is so weird, because it's always called out after the fact. And then in the moment, they're just acting completely bizarre. And then later you find out, oh, they think they just want to start something to keep money coming in. And I'm like, what? That is the least interesting thing of all to watch. You know, we'd never have a season of then Lala counting money. Like, this is the money I got from Send It to Daryl. This is the money I got from that. To me is not interesting. What is interesting, I mean, I think that conversation is very interesting because you're calling out things. I'm just trying to understand the production angle from all of this, because if they did heavily insinuate to people like Lala and Sheena do a certain thing, then they're kind of getting hung out to dry for production. Or is there a world in which Lala thinks that this is what production wants, so she took it upon herself, being a good producer's pet, to do this without being asked? It also begs that larger question. And like I said, and I hate to even think about this, is like, are the right people in charge? You have to assume yes, because they got them to this point. You know, they got them to this point. And I think we are always sometimes so rash in like, got to fire this person, got to, like, you know, like, we don't know We know a little bit, but we don't know the first thing about the ins and outs of daily production on any show. We know a little bit. And that's why it's frustrating, because they're usually sworn to secrecy and have to sign all this paperwork where they can't let you in on day-to-day production. I don't know. So anyways, that's tonight. So get ready. By the time you hear this, you'll probably already have seen it. And we also got the trailer for the Summer House reunion, which is only going to be a 2-part reunion. Now, this is frustrating because Summer House, I liked it so much that I wanted a 3-part reunion. I'm not ready to watch this show go. So we got this trailer that I'm going to play right now from Summer House. I thought this was really interesting.
He told a lot of lies. A lot.
There's just been quite a few things since we broke up that just aren't true.
I hope he's shitting his pants right now, actually.
I'm just curious here, show of hands, who thinks Carl was afraid of Lindsay?
Everybody raises their hands, including Carl. That's what you're missing.
You had a rough start. You did. You had a rough
Came in
start.
late. I immediately hit on a taken woman.
Talking to
No
Jesse.
idea what to expect. Is this real? Is this not?
Now that you've been through it, was it real?
It was super real.
You both like physically do things to come for me.
Who's you got?
Danielle. Your confessionals you think are like super funny.
They are hilarious.
They are damaging.
Take me through what happened after the camera.
Andy talking to West.
The Bravo fan base is all women. Like, just these things that I've never.
Too many temptations. I was becoming very depressed. So I could see how he felt lonely because I felt lonely too.
Yeah. I did not walk in that apartment that day wanting to end the relationship. I'd hoped that maybe it would go differently.
He told me that he had to have the cameras there.
You have the apartment. I paid half the rent for 9 months.
Do you want a pat on the back for that?
Are you seeing anybody?
I am.
Has he seen the show?
No.
Oh boy.
Okay, so that's the Summer House trailer. Now, I know this is like a show that you mainly hear unless you watch on YouTube, and you don't get to see the visuals. So you just hear it. And I realize how, with Summer House especially, the intensity of the music plays such a big part in that, because if you're just listening to it, all you're listening to at home is like dun 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 dun. It sounds like Mad Max or something. Dun 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 dun. And then you'll just hear a voice sometimes of Carl like, I am scared of her. Like, so it's hard to like make a heads or tails if you're just listening to that. But it looks like obviously Carl and Lindsay. Carl wanting, like Lindsay saying that Carl needed the cameras to be there during the breakup. And he's like, no, that's ridiculous. But at the same time, Carl, if you admit that you're scared of Lindsay at the beginning of the reunion, then you probably, like, it's okay to admit that you probably wanted the cameras there because you were scared to do that. Also, Carl, and I'm really hoping they expand way more on this topic, saying that I do not, saying that he didn't want to break up fully when he went to break up, that he was hoping to be able to work on the relationship. I need way more information about that. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I'm excited to hear more. And then, of course, we finally get we're leaning more towards the full answer with West and Sierra, that they are obviously not together anymore. And West is revealing that like there was potentially a lot of temptation with the Bravo fandom, who are all women. And that's what I said. Him and Jesse are going to have a very intense experience when they go to their first BravoCon. It has to be interesting. And there's no real sympathy here. But I will say, and I would hope everybody could maybe try to put themselves in a situation where all of a sudden they're having people throw themselves at them. And, if men don't think with their full brains, how that it doesn't seem like a good situation. I'm sure there's like a little bit of a stasis level where it's rarefied air, where it might take a little time I'm sure you can get lost in it really easily before you actually kind of find your way again. So I'm curious to hear way more about that. But I think we even saw with scenes between West and Sierra that West is in that kind of non-committal, like, I don't know, man, dude, rocking and rolling. Like he had that kind of attitude. So And I would give him probably a couple more years before he breaks out of that. It just seems like when he was on the cover story of a New York Times article this weekend, for God's sakes. It takes a long time to come back to earth, I would imagine. When everybody's telling you that you're the shit, you might actually make the mistake and start believing that yourself at some point. But he seems like a decent person. Listen, all of us males, we already have a strike against us already, rightfully so. But there's also a lot of humanity and decency in a lot of guys as well. They just have to kind of find it and sometimes either work back to it or work their way up to it. But you can't give up on anybody. You can give up on Harvey Weinstein. I think that's a good one to give up on. A huge list of other people, but we do not have time to get into that right now. So that's the Summer House trailer. We're going to have the finale this week, which I'm very sad about. A lot of these, the Valley finale is next week. And it's like, it's too much. We're going to all of a sudden have this like dearth of Bravo product. Now, Real Housewives of Dubai, it premieres the first week of June. So that will be potentially exciting. But we have to remind ourselves of what happened in the first season. They need some kind of tutorial to let people know to not be scared to watch Real Housewives of Dubai. But what I'm imagining that they waited so long in between seasons that the first episode will probably give us a real big primer on everything that we missed and a big hi, hello, how are you? Come on in. It's fine. You don't need to have watched the first season to enjoy the second season. If I was a producer on that show, that would be an edict of we've got to treat this, characters that the first season that you know and love. But if you didn't watch the first season, you're going to feel just at home. You're going to love it. You're going to want to keep tuning in. So this will be really interesting to watch the ratings on Real Housewives of Dubai and how much we take to it or we don't take to it. So it's interesting. And I know that they're rushing, like they already put Beverly Hills into production for Real Housewives. A couple of other shows, Southern Charm is still filming, or they're filming. The filming's back up again, which, by the way, also I did want to mention Catherine Dennis, because Catherine Dennis from Southern Charm, she was obviously pulled over and arrested on suspicion of DUI. And if you watch the police cam videos, it is really heartbreaking on so many levels. I do want to start off by saying, because a lot of people ask me if I did have thoughts on this. And of course I had thoughts on this. And I think it was the Patreon Live where I said, oh my goodness, if you go back and watch those first seasons of Southern Charm, your heart really goes out to Catherine in retrospect, because you see how these just really older men. I mean, Thomas Ravenel is much older than Catherine. This is like a 19-year-old girl or 20, like very, very, very young. And you see it, like, it's so shocking to go back and watch those early seasons of Southern Charm now, because really she looks like a child. When I was younger watching, I'm like, but now you go back, you're like, oh, that is a straight up child. And these men, and I don't know, I don't want to put this on Southern men or anything like that, but it almost seemed like a game of sport to be with certain women like Catherine. And I can't speak to Catherine's psychological makeup or anything of that nature, but you do see somebody very troubled. There's a lot of stories that have come out about Catherine. I believe a hit and run accident at one of the children's schools, if I'm not mistaken. It just seemed to be a lot of things piling up. And we do know that Thomas Ravenel is not afraid to use the legal system against people and her. But I will also say driving drunk and is just a no-no. No matter how you've been taken advantage of by people, no matter what life presents you, it is a really, really horrendous thing to do, and you watch those police videos and your heart goes out to her. But at the same time, it's just something that she should not have ever put herself in. And it's always easier to say this on the other side of things, right? We can always, well, I would never, like, you don't know the exact situation, but you do see a pattern of behavior that you're like, man, this seems like she is really going down a dark road. And, for people like that, well, somebody was like, oh, well, do you want to see her back on Southern Charm? And I got to be honest with you, not like this, not until she figures out for herself how to live her life and what that's going to look like. So no, I don't think that is a healthy thing to throw in the mix at all. In fact, I was like, oh my God, I was watching early seasons of Southern Charm and I was like, God, thank God Bethany Frankel doesn't know about this. She'd probably try to get Catherine on Reality Reckoning. It's hard though, because these people, they get used to a paycheck. And like I said, it's, after a couple of years, it gets sizable, not in the beginning, but they also get used to the attention and the notoriety and all of that stuff. Like we've seen time and time again, just talking about West from Summer House, how big of an aphrodisiac that can be. It can be really seductive, I would imagine. And all of a sudden that gets ripped away from you and you are confronted with your real life without cameras and raising two children and trying to be a young person at the same time, dealing with different, romances, moving, court, ex-husbands, ex-boyfriends. I mean, life, we know, me and we know how tough it can be. And we don't have any of that bullshit. But imagine having something like that and then getting that taken away too. That I would imagine also spurs a lot of anger in somebody and can potentially make things worse. That's why I always with the NFL, this isn't funny, but I always read about the programs that they would have for young athletes to teach them how to invest their money well, because the NFL knows that this is not a lifelong career. And I always figure that I always think that about reality stars as well, not just for Bravo, but any reality star in general, of like, hey, maybe it's time to think about the future. That's why I'm always like psyched when I, even with Lala, where I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, like let's build a portfolio, property portfolio. Great. We can sell one of those houses if things really get dire, once all this is over. But like, yeah, let's invest. Schwartz is investing with all of his plants. Wouldn't it be great if Schwartz does open like a plant store or whatever those fucking things are called? I'm a man. I don't know what plant stores are called. Horticulture store, whatever. Anyways, but it is. I think that it is such a unique experience for us viewers, and it's something relatively new within the last 3 decades of us becoming so parasocial entwined with these reality stars that we do start to actually worry about their well-being. Like we see it in the really bad instances like Catherine from Southern Charm, but then even we're forced to be presented with it by Lala. Somebody that's like, yo, we should not listen, Randall, horrible person. You got away with him. You got away from him. Very strong. Raising a child, having another one on the way. Hell yeah. But I always think about like, but look at all you have. Look at all you, like, man, like you're on the right path. Just don't blow it by completely going up against Ariana, somebody that's not wanting to go up against anybody. Oh my goodness. But it's fun to talk about, right? I listen, this is a loose show because I wasn't planning on doing this, so we can kind of go whichever way we want. But it is one of those funny things. Like you realize how serious, how silly this all is, because you have me every day spouting off about these people. Not like I know how to live my life. You out there listening, you're spouting off with me. You're probably like disagreeing or agreeing with me, or you're going online saying all these intense positions. And then I was just like, man, would any of our lives hold up to any of this bullshit? Like, I'm wondering how quick I would crumble in any of these situations. Now, I don't own any property. So maybe if I own property, it'd make it a little easier, like maybe if I couldn't, pay for my leased Corolla anymore, it would be a different story. But it is also funny how we, the audience, can see what is going on and what is wrong with laser-like precision. Yet with our own lives, I don't even know how to fucking not have night snacks. I don't know how to not get into ice cream at night. Like I can't even control myself with that. But at the same time, I do know what is right for Lala. Isn't that hysterical? I and I alone know what is right for Lala to do with her life, but I cannot stop eating at night. I cry if I have to go exercise. Oh, life. What are we supposed to do with this thing, you guys? Human existence. Who would have thought? Who? Are you guys watching Real Housewives of New Jersey? I am. I finally caught up. It was the last show on my list of shows while I was out overseas. When I came back, I had this list of shows that I had to catch up with. You got your Love After Lockup, your Seeking Sister Wife, The Jinx, season 2, which I loved. It ended this past week. You got Hacks. You got Vanderpump Rules. You got The Valley. You got Summer House Martha's Vineyard. You got Summer House. You've got, and then like at the very end of that, like literally the last one was Real Housewives of New Jersey. Because I've associated such bad vibes with that show. And the thing was, so I finally caught up. And I think I probably have a little bit of a different opinion than you guys do. But I was I was like fine with it. It was like fine. It was fine background TV. Like, it's like some of the same beats that we see every season. It's just that Melissa and Joe and Teresa aren't directly engaging. So they're just engaging with other people. Like, so it's still bad vibes, but they're not directly engaging with other people. But now I also look at it a little different. Like, okay, so I'm not getting this. So then I'm kind of able to try to then take these storylines for real. Like, we had Margaret with her husband, and Margaret's ex, he passed away last year. And so you have Margaret Josephs talking about this. They go to this burger shack, her and her husband, and she talks about thinking that her ex was always going to be there. And, her dude, Joe Benigno was like, listen, I can't take away your pain. I can't do this. I can just be here for you. And I don't know, I don't know if it was just like having 3 days off in a row, but I personally kind of got emotional about it. And then I was like, online, this is why online sucks. You go on Twitter and be like, oh, the fakest bullshit you've ever seen. Oh, come on. And I was sitting there going, well, listen, I kind of liked it. I mean, I didn't think it was the most gripping thing ever, but I mean, also maybe I'm coming off a year of loss myself, but I was like, man, I'm touched by this. And then it's kind of funny because Teresa and Louis, I don't know what the true story is with them reaching out to fans and pumping out stories with Jen Aiden and all this stuff. But I will say, when it gets to their storylines, they do seem happy together, but they seem like a cartoon. It's so elevated. Like, hi, oh, Gia. It's so elevated. It's like a cartoon. And then it's just interesting. She's such a character. I think that's why Teresa is a legend. I mean, truly a legend of reality TV. But it is such an interesting, because you don't know anybody like Teresa, right? You don't know a lot of people like Teresa. Even the other housewives on Jersey are so far from Teresa that sometimes the show is held down by shackled to Teresa because she is such a domineering force. Does that make sense? It's not like she's not even when she's not trying to be domineering, she's just one of those people that you're just fascinated to watch because you're like, how does this work? How does this all work? And then even what they show us with her and Louis, you're like, well, we know this isn't how does it work when the cameras aren't there? I almost want to put GoPros, just hide GoPros around that house to see how this relationship works off camera. Because it almost seems so weirdly cartoonishly perfect that you're like, nobody can. Is this true? You spend the whole episode wondering if this is complete bullshit, what part of it's bullshit. And then they have the annual softball game in this past week's episode where Melissa goes right to Jen Aiden going, hey, why don't we go out and talk? I don't want to not talk because you're friends with my sister-in-law and my sister-in-law doesn't like me or whatever. And you can tell Jen Aiden was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And you do hear that Jen Aiden and Melissa kind of get a little bit closer this season because we do know Jackie Goldschneider gets closer with Teresa and Jen Aiden. And we see Jen Fessler, a friend of, but Jen Fessler making inroads with Teresa, which then upsets Rachel Fuda. And then you have Danielle Cabral, who really interesting family. Now, if Danielle Cabral, I feel if she had been on an early iteration of Jersey, one of the early seasons, I feel like she would be much more legendary. I almost feel like it's sometimes wrong place, wrong time for Danielle. She's not able to truly show how entertaining of a housewife she can be just because she is on these seasons of Jersey, if that makes sense. I feel like she's got all the makings. And in fact, she has an issue with her dad right now, not talking to her dad. And then her brother, remember that whole brother situation where I was like, damn, if they can convince the brother to come on Jersey, we've got potentially another Teresa Joey storyline on our hands, which at the beginning, that Teresa Joey Gorga storyline was chef's kiss. I mean, I say that people make fun of me because I say this at least once every couple of weeks. That christening episode, one of my top 10 favorite Housewives episodes of all time. Just legendary status. Oh, just gives me chills how good that damn show is. Oh, wait, I got to answer this. Okay, sorry, I had to answer a couple of things. But you know what I'm talking about with Jersey, where it's got all the parts. It's just that there is so much toxicity off the show with social media. And then even on the show, there are relationships that will never be able to be fixed. So you're like, do you keep investing in a show? Because I think the assumption with a lot of entertainment is that you are headed towards a goal. you're headed towards a resolution. That's why Vanderpump Rules this season is even trickier too, because you were like, wait a sec, Ariana will never be able to make up with Lala and potentially distrust Sheena for a little bit after what happens. Now, I will say, I'm trying not to, I don't know if I'll get in trouble, but I did talk to Janet about this from the Valley, and she said, you listen, you will be surprised. Because I hinted, I said, hey, is anything changing in terms of perception between people like Lala and Ariana and Sheena since the reunion has started airing, since all of this have heads cooled at all? And she kind of hinted that she said heads potentially are cooling. So I don't know what that necessarily means, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but she did point out, is like, listen, every time you've thought with Vanderpump Rules, there's no effing way that these people would come back together again. They usually come back together again, because I was also pushing her on Jax Taylor and his new friend. And I'm like, how do you guys even hang out with this guy? How do you hang out with Jax? Like, how is it? Like, every episode, my whole thing is just trying to like figure out how people are still hanging out with this man. Like, I'm like, he must be so damn magnetic. And they're like, she's like, well, he is really entertaining. And I'm like, don't you want to scream at him? Don't you want to scream at him for God? Now that I'm saying all this stuff, I'm just so ticked I can't release this interview. Anywho, you with most entertainment, you're looking, even if you don't agree, you don't think you agree, you are looking, or you've been trained to look for resolution, conflict resolution. And with Jersey, the main storyline, there will be no conflict resolution. They've set up this Teresa Gorga, Joey, Melissa, Teresa thing now, what feels like the majority of my life. And they've come to finally accept, even though we've accepted it as an audience years ago, that this is not going to happen. So it's like, okay, well, now we got to invest in all of these other relationships and stories. And what do we got on the docket? And it's weird because you do have those same characters still in the background, but we have to kind of divorce ourselves from ever thinking that they can resolve anything, because it's just not going to happen. It's ridiculous. So that's the thing. Somebody said that they were bummed that I don't talk about Jersey and I don't talk about it on the Pop Culture Roundup on Monday with Sophie. And I do want to assure that person, you might not listen to every episode, so you might not hear this, but I do watch it. I do watch all of these shows. It's just that sometimes I don't know how to approach talking about it. And I don't necessarily, sometimes it's like it can be, what do they call that? A fool's bargain? Is that a devil's bargain? I don't, it just can be really hard, because I think sometimes the social media aspect of it all will sometimes completely steer you away from the actual show. It kind of is like, oh, I don't want to deal with talking about it, because it just seems so negative when I watch people talk about it online. And I choose to just be very negative about Vanderpump Rules. I was going to go to something about her today after Jeff's show, but it's closed on Tuesdays. So I was like, damn. So I wasn't able to make it there. I guess they're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, but I am ready to get one of every sandwich. I am ready to try all of these sandwiches. So hopefully we can make this happen tomorrow or the next day, but a sandwich review will be in your future. So that's my thoughts on Real Housewives of New Jersey. Like I said, I'll keep watching it. It's super easy to watch TV. So it's not like it is a huge chore. You just want TV sometimes. You want the TV that you can watch while you're scrolling on your phone. And then sometimes you want to watch the TV that you got to put the phone down, that you're like, holy shit, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And that you want to watch again and again. And so sometimes, and as Bravo fans, we are used to this. It's like what I hear people talk about with like baseball teams. It's like a season. You're like, okay, tough season. They're not going to make the playoffs this year, but you still support them. I support all these shows, but there are just certain ones that capture my imagination. And I find it hard to force things or fake things. In terms of like, I think you can tell when I'm like, I don't like something or I don't feel into something, because I think also I know what it feels like to be into something, and it's a really great feeling. It's that thing you're like, ooh, this feels like a drug. So when you don't have that, it's like, ooh, you can try to find those little things that excite you, but as a whole, you're looking for the entire experience. That's why Vanderpump Rules, what a weird thing, because you have all of these people, these characters, these cast members, all with different agendas. They're not working as one unit, which is so weird, because how would you work as one unit when somebody's completely cheated on? Anyways, it's a whole ball of wax. So that's my thoughts on Real Housewives in New Jersey. We did Summer House. We talked Vanderpump Rules. Okay, now, do you want to talk a little bit about Joseph and the artist formerly known as Rachel Leviss? So, Joe all of a sudden did a bunch of podcasts last week. She did 2-time appearance. That is her 2nd time appearance on Rachel's podcast, which I believe just hit episode number 27. So congrats to Rachel on 27 episodes. She also did, I think, a 2-hour podcast on Vanderpump Rules Party, which is like wild. That's a huge get. I was on Jolene Lunzer's YouTube show last week. Awesome. So awesome. She's so talented and had a blast. And it went like 2.5 hours, I think, because we just kept going. And she was filling me in on some Joe stuff, but also asked me if I would ever want to interview Joe. I don't think I would. And I hope that's not disappointing to people, but I just don't know. I don't know how I would approach that interview. It's like interviewing Jax Taylor. You're never going to be able to have a truly honest conversation with Jax Taylor. So sometimes it's like, well, it would be fun. It would be funny to have that experience, but what are you truly going to get out of it? Because Joe now, if you clock the interview she does, she backtracks, she changes stories. She, there's just, it seems like a different story or a different angle every time she approaches something. And it seems so scatterbrained at times. And I'm really not trying to be hurtful. I'm just trying to like what I notice and what I see from reality stars over the years. Now, I will say, and I want to start this whole segment by saying, yes, of course, this is Tom Schwartz's fault. Of course. And you see Tom Schwartz kind of realizing potentially what a lot of us realized before is that regardless of Tom using Joe for a lot of different things, Joe doesn't seem like the most balanced person out there. Doesn't mean she's not the nicest person out there. But like a lot of us, she's probably very confused about her life and goes in 30 different directions 30 times a day. But the unfortunate thing now is that she has made her way on our screens. And I think she kind of likes the low level attention that you get. And so that's why you see so many IG lives. That's why she is agreeing to do all of these podcasts. And I do think there is something there that is probably, I don't want to encourage too much because I think there's probably, like I said, this is like, I'm not the judge, the jury, the whatever, but like it is, like, I don't know if that's, I get nervous about making people like that stars. Because like I find her so funny and so intriguing in so many ways, and just the way that she approaches things or even moves or makes sounds or talks about a turtle. But then there's another side of it. And if you've had anybody in your life that you feel has, I don't know. I think people like Joe, there's a scary side to them, even if they do not see that necessarily themselves. But Schwartz going on like Brittany's podcast or Dodie's podcast, and he's kind of talking about this in roundabout ways of like, oh, I caught her in all of these lies, but I don't want to get too into it. And it is, I believe him 100%. But I also want to point out that Schwartz has now been caught in so many lies, and Schwartz has done all of this behavior. And I guess the person without a heart would potentially say, well, enjoy your own medicine, a taste of your own medicine. But at the same time, I do wonder, and we still haven't got answers to some basic questions. Like if all of these things were out there, why do you encourage her to be on the show? How was that conversation had? Did you bring her to the show? Did producers reach out and got her on the show without your knowledge? How did this all come about? And there seems to be the big bone of contention with all of this is that what exactly were Schwartz and Joe? Because Joe seems to present it as a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. Schwartz has been very careful about not presenting it that way and saying, oh, it's just stars crossed. We were like at a time where we meant so much to each other. And like, oh, it was just mystical and magical. And like in another life, if I had like another, like I like Schwartz is always like, if I like in another life, if I was a completely different person, if I had a different brain, maybe if I was a good girl, he always gives you like 30 different reasons of like, well, it could have worked out if. Which is hard because I think coming from like being a people pleaser myself is that you will then end up doing way more damage because you think you are trying to be, I don't know. There's so many things wrapped up in it. First off, we're cowards. So there's that, right? And I think he's a coward. And then secondly, you're trying to not hurt the person because you realize that person probably has way stronger feelings for you than you have for them. So you're trying to potentially take care of them, but you're doing it in the completely wrong way. You're doing it by giving them 30 million compliments, and all they hear in their head is, that person loves me, that person loves me, that person loves me, that person loves me. When I think what Schwartz is potentially doing is like, listen, I like this person, and I want them to feel good about themselves so they can find somebody else. And like I have a feeling he's convinced himself it's more like something like that. Now, the thing where also Schwartz completely fucked up, and we've talked about this multitudes of times, is that he had a continuing sexual relationship with this person. That was new information that even shocked me. And now we don't have dates or times. I don't know if Schwartz hasn't read his journal or his day planner to us, but there seems to be like that they were hooking up during filming. And even in the final episode, the finale in San Francisco, they slept in the same bed. Now, that's a really hard thing to do. And I wonder how much of that was Schwartz being a coward and not being able, like, not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings, or was Schwartz completely oblivious and just thought, oh, with our friends, like, it's bed, like, it looked like they both had separate rooms. So how does that end up happening? And, those are the questions that you don't get with all of these podcasts. Sometimes you're just like, man. And the glaring omission from the Rachel Joe podcast, just like the glaring omission at the reunion when Joe was on in part 2, was the question of, when you get confronted with Ariana not trusting you because you were part of this whole cheating scandal, what's your answer for that? Like, Rachel, if you are listening, congratulations on getting 27 episodes in. No joke. But also, if you have somebody like Joe on 2 times in a row, at some point, you guys are aware, like, why are there still secrets being kept? You're obviously not protecting Sandoval anymore. So are you protecting yourself? Like, what is it? Because you guys were in on something at a certain point. And to keep like just skipping past those questions seems completely disingenuous and dishonest when you're presenting this as Rachel going rogue, complete honesty, complete your side of the story. What is your side of the story? Now, part of me, I think the audience always then fills in the blanks. They're like, okay, well, if they're not talking about it, maybe. And I will say, even listening to the Rachel Joe podcast, sometimes Joe will say something and you'll expect Rachel to comfort her in some way. And Rachel just like, oh, it's too bad. Anyways, and it'll be like weirdly unfeeling. And I think Rachel just kind of has that about her. Some people are just born with certain ways that they move and talk. But it does, like, I do wonder, like, in those situations back in the day when Rachel and Tom were going for it and Schwartz and Joe were going for it and they were doubling and it was very secretive, you had to have a conversation at some point. The 2 girls involved with the guys around going like, what the fuck's going on? And Joe's like, smell my fingers. I touched Schwartz's butt. Like, like what, like you had to have. So I feel like it is weird when we have somebody like Joe coming on screen and trying to go, why are you mean to me, Katie? Well, because, I mean, first off, Katie's situation is entirely different, but also it does not help that you were legitimately a part of this scandal. And it feels like something that we just don't talk about at all. It's like we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about this part of it, when to me, that's the most fascinating part. I want to talk about the times when you're out at bars hiding, trying not to be discovered, but at the same time, testing the boundaries. We had the ski trip where fans come up to Tom and take pictures and you can tell he's busted. I mean, these are all the things. And you both know what the deal was. But also, you can always blame it on, well, I was really in love with Schwartz. I thought this was the man for the rest of my life. So you're going to go out on a limb for the man that you love. But why aren't we talking about that? To me, that's the conversation that I want to see be had between these 2 women. And, but it also is, the Rachel and Joe podcast of it all is hard to listen to for a lot of reasons, just because I think, Rachel is the one steering this ship. And I don't think she is nearly away from her sickness in terms of length of time, to be not therapizing, but to be approaching these subject matters. And when you approach these subject matters of, I went away, I worked on myself and all this stuff, it still doesn't mean that you know shit about shit. Because in the previous episode of Rachel Goes Rogue, she talks about them, or 2 episodes before that, talks about them not being able to keep her name out of their mouth at the reunion. And like my aunt, it's like, duh. Of course they're going to be talking to you. You are the fulcrum of this season. You are this season. You are the snuffleupagus of this season. You will be talked about, but you will never be seen. You are a rumor, a whisper, but you will be talked about. You will be talked about. And yes, that is frustrating, I'm sure, but also I am no producer's pet, but I will say you were given the opportunity to come back. The other thing I don't understand why we don't really fully talk about it between Joe and Rachel is the fact that, Joe, you saw what this did to your friend. You saw this. Why did you go on this? Why did you then support this? And why does it seem like you still support Sandoval? Are there disagreements in how Joe views Sandoval as opposed to how Rachel views Sandoval? I am so curious what more time does to both of these people. Because if she didn't have the reality reckoning lawsuit, shout out to Bethany and Chanel, would we still be where we're at? Like, if we didn't have that lawsuit, there is something in me, this really gut feeling that Rachel would eventually have agreed to come back to television. Obviously not this season, and maybe not next season, but she would have agreed at some point. And so that's why I feel like there is some ultimate plan in place with this reality reckoning. But then Bethany gets potentially distracted by Chanel, and then like her attention goes elsewhere because that's where the clicks are going. And I am so, it's like we guys, we all know what they show us. We all know, we presume certain things, but we'll never know the real shit. It's like somebody out there knows all the answers. Somebody out there is the lead lawyer for Bethany Frankel's reality reckoning. And we'll never get the real deal. What is the timeline? Like, hell, we got a timeline for the next 30 Marvel movies that are going to come out. Like, why don't we have a timeline for what the fuck's going to happen with reality reckoning down the road? And I like these kind of loose shows. I can just go anywhere. You guys are driving yourself off a bridge and you're like, oh, get focused. Okay, so let's go over the Rachel and Joe podcast transcript together. We'll see what we can find out. And by the way, for those who actually listen to Rachel on a weekly basis, is it, I've listened to a handful of episodes now. I've covered them, from time to time. I love getting new information. But what do you feel? Do you feel like she's vastly improved as a podcaster? Do you feel like this is her niche? It is, I do wonder and I speculate where she goes in the future. I mean, I speculate that with all the Vanderpump Rules cast members, which it is funny. We still consider her a Vanderpump Rules cast member. As much as she tries to push away from it, she now makes her living still from it. So that's the thing, is that when you go away for your mental health, but then still make money or a paycheck off the thing that you complain about, it's interesting. It is kind of that Bethany Frankel game plan, except that Frankel has money in the bank because of Skinny Girl. Rachel, unfortunately, never got her Skinny Girl. And now she is still dependent on the Vanderpump ecosystem. She's still dependent. And you can tell it frustrates her. There's little chinks in her armor where at times the mask will slip and you can tell how mad she truly is. And I'm wondering, just as a human, because I would imagine we all are at a time, how scared she gets still of like, did I make the right decision? Am I making the right decisions? I know she started dating somebody. It seemed like he had two kids from a previous marriage. I think he was a fisherman, a Republican, seemed very, family oriented. I don't know much more about him, but I thought that was interesting in terms of, because I was like, oh, I thought she would be single for a long time before trying to work on that. Because imagine like trying to mentally fix or mentally recognize your patterns, but then throwing love on top of that. It's kind of like Carl and Lindsay, where we all think like maybe Carl should have waited a little bit longer until he was way more confident and comfortable in his sobriety and trying to figure out who he is growing into, that like what person he is becoming. So it's hard to then like throw somebody else into the mix when you are still changing as a person. And I wonder about that with Rachel as well. When she dates, like Rachel is not fully formed yet. Rachel is still being fully formed, it seems, week after week after week. So how do you then, and this is not a question just for Rachel, but how do you then let somebody else in when you are still trying to find out who you are at your core? Really interesting. So this episode is entitled Lessons Learned. No, sorry. This is 26. This one's called Joe Dirt. Love the title. Joe Dirt, famous David Spade movie. The description for this, simple but sweet, just says, Joe's got a whole lot more to say, ... Ominous. Very ominous. Joe Dirt. I love that Joe is just called Joseph and Joe Dirt, Joe Blow. There's not ever like Joe the beauty queen. It's always like Joe Dirty. Joe Dirty. And Joe's like, I love it. That's great. But secretly probably hates it. Like, I don't want to be called Joe Dirt. Please. Please. So this episode, 34 minutes, 43 if you count the ad. No, sorry, 34 minutes, but a lot of ads. And I'm like, how do you guys only get away with a 30-minute conversation? There's so many questions. So anyways, we start the episode where this is Rachel, Savannah Levis, and she's like, today we have Joe back in the studio. And we find out this is her first repeat guest. And I'm pretty confident that Joe will continually come back on this show. She said she wanted to have her back to talk about the reunion. She made her debut appearance, first reunion. She told Rachel how much she appreciated being on her podcast the last time, how much it meant to her because she finally had a voice. So she wanted to have Joe back on to speak about the reunion. And Joe said, I'm so glad to be back because whether or not I stumble upon my words and all that, it's a safe space for me. And Rachel's like, do you feel like it was validated in a way? And Joe's like, yeah, so many things that you didn't see and you did see. She's talking about the reunion now. But I think that for me personally, she says, walking off that stage, I felt really validated. And I didn't expect that anybody would want to validate my feelings or anything that happened. Like, I mean, looking at what you had gone through last season, like you were not, I don't want to bring you back up from last season, but I had that in the back of my mind that it could 100% be a shit show. And especially because you were talked about so much on this reunion. So I was very validated and felt 8 out of 10 validated at this reunion. Now, Joe making that mistake that a lot of us do, where it's not narcissism, but it is everything revolves around me. So in her head, she's already equating herself to Rachel. Like, it is a very different situation what Rachel was walking into last reunion as opposed to what you were walking into in the second part. You are a B to C storyline in this season's machine of storylines. So it is interesting though that she thought like, oh my God, I could be walking into this thing where everybody's like going to freak out at me. And sure, there is that element of there could be some truth to that because you don't know how Katie's going to react, but she felt very validated. So also she keeps using the word validated, which makes you think that is such a big thing for Joe to feel validated, to feel like her story's validated. But part of me also worries that part of that is she also wants people to tell her that Schwartz is a fool to not be with her, that she belongs with Schwartz. I feel like that's the kind of validation that she's ultimately after. That's the vibe you get from her. And I'm trying to be kind about that, but that is that overall thing of, I think she just wants people, and almost she would be okay with getting Schwartz even if he's guilted into doing it. Like maybe if all his friends guilt him about how he treated me, he would actually consider being with me, not realizing that Joe's true strength is herself and leaning into that and not leaning into any of Schwartz's bullshit or neuroses. Like, deal with your own neuroses, right? And Rachel is like, well, it did feel like even Schwartz and you were not quite on the same page. I'm like, Rachel, very observant, huge. And Joe was like, well, we were not on the same page. I said, yes, we were not. We were on the same page in terms of 0. It was very interesting. And Rachel's like, yeah, it seems to be a consistent. And they're laughing about this. And Joe says consistent theme throughout. Big hug at Crafty, which, by the way, she says, she gives us a little insider showbiz knowledge. Crafty means where you can go and have a little snack and get another hug. And then on camera, it was different. So she lets us know about Crafty. And it is true. Crafty is great on sets, unless you're a non-union actor. And then you get like rotten apples and stuff. But if you are like a Screen Actors Guild AFTRA, extra or actor, you get crafty with like primo shit. Like you just get really great snacks all the time. But I like that Joe was hanging out at Crafty and talking to Crafty, like, hey, what do you call this? You call this Crafty? All right. I got that up in the old Joe noggin now. Crafty. But it almost makes it seem like we'd go over to like have a big hug at Crafty. Schwartz, part of this was Schwartz genuine in like hugging Joe, or was Schwartz trying to also comfort her enough for her to not throw him under the bus? Or was he truly worried about her there, worried about her well-being, worried about her psychology, and trying to give her as much positive reinforcement as possible? It can also be a mixture of those two things as well. But I bet she remembers Big Crafty because she likes those big hugs, right? So Rachel says, when you were asked about the timeline of your relationship, Schwartz isn't disputing the details of your relationship, like he fully agrees to how many times you guys had sex. And Joe's like, it's the back end of everything. When you think about like a book and you open the book up, he's not really disputing the chapters 1, 3, 7, and 9. And Rachel's like, he's disputing the existence of the book. And Joe's like, yes, he is disputing the existence of the book. So I think what that means is that to Joe, the book is their boyfriend and girlfriend, very serious relationship. And Schwartz, according to this, is cherry picking these things of like, well, this is true, this is true, this is true. But the whole thesis of this book genuinely doesn't exist. It's a novella, not a novel, like it's slim, not a Les Mis type 1,000-page book. And Joe is saying, no, this is a book. The unfortunate thing, Joe, is going into this, remember that this is not your story. This is Schwartz's story because he's been a cast member since season 1. You are a chapter of Schwartz's overall book, a chapter. And I know that's hurtful to say, but that's what it is. So Rachel's like, well, they're literally saying you guys were not in a relationship, but you clearly were. And Joe's like, we were. And in the chapters, you can see it. But in the book, in the cover, in the back, he's disputing like the whole thing, like the label. Now I feel like we might be going on too much with the book example. She says, now when I have to remind myself how I felt about him, the reason why Tom, I believe, didn't want to put a label on anything was because I was a very present person. And I knew in my mind that I was trying to help Tom by helping him with his emotions after Katie and everything. And I was trying to motivate him to be more focused on saying things in a song, whack, but like saying things in the present moment, not be so future focused, because he would always be on his phone and he would always be worried about something in the future. So when I came into the picture, it was a very enlightening experience for him. And he said it before, and I think that scared him. And I knew that it would be a process to get through to him on this in terms of his mindset. I also think that when it came down to it, every situation that him and I were in, we were able to navigate it very well together. I think that the biggest thing for me was that we were not on the same page, apparently, in terms of what we labeled our relationship. I would say that if you would not see him and I together on or off camera, I don't know what dating looks like, but that's dating. Like, listen, Joe, I think a lot of us accept you guys were dating. I don't know if Schwartz accepts that you guys were dating, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because everybody eventually needs to move on from this, right? And I feel like I get nervous. It is going to be a round robin of the amount of times that she wants to then continually talk about this and get this same story out, when I feel like, dude, we get it. We get that you got dicked over to a degree. We that is something that I think we can all agree on. But also it's very interesting in terms of she'll always kind of be like, I don't know. We just go with the flow. But in paragraphs like this, you realize she's not going with the flow. She is completely thought out in how she feels like she completely understands Schwartz. And almost so much so that Schwartz is almost like a project to her. Like, oh, I can fix him up. He's always on his phone. I can get him living in the moment and I can do this. And I knew his mindset was going to be difficult to crack. It seems like you knew very much, like you had made a map of his entire persona and knew the ways to try to get in to make him the person that you know him to be. But at the same time, in doing this, maybe you let down your guard so much that you completely lost yourself in helping this person or thinking that you were trying to heal this person. And in the end, Schwartz probably was like, obviously when he does talk about it, he was like, oh, it's like so special, like in the star. So like he did appreciate those things, but overall he didn't appreciate them from you at the end of the day. And that's hurtful, but I feel like a lot of us go through those kind of relationships, men and women. And it's really hard because you do have those moments of such clarity and such beautiful moments with another human being where you're like, oh, this feels so right. Oh my God, this is what life's all about. But sometimes those are just fleeting moments. And, you know, you want to live there, but you just can't. The other person doesn't want to live there with you. And in reality shows, it's hard because then it gives you this forum or you're almost forced to continually talk about it. I just wonder for Jo where that's going to stop, and on her healing journey, where is she at? Because it does seem, man, this is so well thought out from her point of view. And it seems like she really did think about him so much, his inner workings, his faults, his all of this stuff. And that kind of was like, wow, it seems in some ways something by design for you of what you were trying to have happen that ended up not happening in the long run, which I would imagine then spurs a little bit of anger. So Rachel's like, well, that is a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. It's a two-way street. And Joe's like, and honestly, I don't want him to ever think that he did anything incorrect. I don't want me to think that I ever did anything incorrect. I think at the end of the day, the answer is, I don't know. No clue. So she goes back to that default of Joe of like, I don't know. We're all great. We're all da, da, da. And it's like, no, you just said where, you know, you've spent so much time saying where what Schwartz did wrong and what Schwartz is not able to do for you. But then at the end of the day, you also then end it with, I don't want to have him think he's incorrect and I don't want to be incorrect. At the end of the day, I don't know. So it is weird. I feel like she does know a lot more than, you know, she does know. She does know. I think that kind of line is a protection of, I don't mean no harm. I'm all good. And obviously she's not all good. So Rachel, you know, queen of relationships, jumps in and she's like, yeah, from my perspective, it seems like Schwartz is love avoidant. In ending that relationship with Katie and going through the divorce, it seemed like he was in a state of mind where he was scared to love again. Although you guys did tell each other that you loved each other. So this is interesting. And I feel like this is the part that I sometimes, but we all do it, including myself. But sometimes as a listener, it gets a little weird because I'm like, it almost starts to feel a little bit diagnosing. And hey, these are new things that I just learned this year, and I will now put them on other people. And there is some truth to this because after you go through a divorce of that magnitude of a relationship, you are scared of everything. You are scared to love again. And also when you do love again, you don't trust that because you felt it before and it didn't work. Like there are so many things the human mind goes through in these situations. But then, you know, she also was like, oh, you guys were telling each other you loved each other, you know, but also there's friend love, there's romantic, like, you know, they didn't, Schwartz wasn't like, I love you and also want to continually have sex with you and marry you. I love you. I like it feels good to say those things as well. I think in the future, Schwartz needs to stamp out any of that kind of behavior with anybody besides his girlfriend and his mom. So Joe's like, I think he was scared to love again. And then you're right. And then I came into the picture and he didn't know what to do with it. And then really backpedaled. And then I'm going to go into another potential relationship and then not explain why we broke up. Like, I don't know. But I also know that like, that's him to work that out. If, you know, I've been sad about it, but I've also been able to realize that he really didn't take me seriously. And that's it right there. Like she keeps answering her own questions. He really didn't take you seriously. And that's why I think you might think it was a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but was that ever said? Did he ever ask you to be his girlfriend? You were acting like that, but that's still not it. So I think in Schwartz's mind, that like, oh no, we never said it. I never asked. Da, 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 da. You know, I think there is also this fallacy that you think when you are older and you don't have experience. I don't know if you come out of you all of a sudden think that the world has moved on and it moves in different ways than it did when you were single last time, you know? And I think Schwartz is a really bad example to use for this because he is a celebrity and a lot of women just legitimately throw themselves at him. Like literally I'll get DMs of people like, I'd fuck him right now. I'd fuck him 2 ways. You know, my whole family would. Like, so he's a bad example because he's not some down on his luck guy. Even though he likes to kind of pretend he is, he's not a down on his luck guy. But I think also sometimes you get others like, oh, is this casual? It's just like people do casual. Like, you know, like you wonder what those conversations were. And Joe, I think even in the scenes that we saw, be like, oh no, it's all good. Even though we had sex, nah, we're good. We're good. That's how we met her. Remember? It was like this, like, oh no, it's all good. Even though we used to have sex, it's all good. And you knew in your gut that it wasn't all good as a viewer, but you're like, well, we'll take them at their word. They seem, you know, progressive. And then at the end of the day, you see that it wasn't all true. She was very hurt the whole time. Rachel says, well, it seemed like, no, he goes, so she goes, Joe goes, he didn't really take me seriously. And Rachel goes, I guess. Anyways, it seemed like the cast pretty much supported you and all agreed, including Katie. that Schwartz was leading you on. And Katie even described Schwartz as having fuckboy behavior. Was that validating to hear coming from Katie? And did you expect that at all? And Joe's like, I did not expect Katie to call out Schwartz as a fuckboy at the reunion. And I did not expect her to even go there. And then Rachel's like, was it validated? And she says, no. Because again, it's almost as if like you're just kind of putting like a little bit of a Band-Aid on something that you just like rip open for like a year, like Joe's this, Joe's that, Joe's this. And then I'm going to be at the reunion and be like, hey, by the way, you're a fuckboy. So that's another thing of in this situation where I also believe that Joe is not the main character. So it's hard when I'm sure you're out there and Katie's like, oh, he's just a fuckboy. And potentially Joe's like, well, what does that do for me? And it's like, well, Joe, thank you for being here this season. Take some free snacks at, Crafty on your way out. It's like, okay, well, he called Schwartz a fuckboy. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't but remember, this is Schwartz's story, not hers. So it can't be validated. It's got to feel pretty empty because you're like, oh, it's just written off as that. Oh, he's just a fuckboy. I just have to accept that and move on. That's it. That's the big mystery. It didn't mean anything. He's just a fuckboy. So then Rachel's like, well, where that was before, like when you ripped me a new one every second. Oh, so sorry. Joe says, well, where was that before, like when you ripped me a new one every second you got in regards to Katie? And then validation doesn't come from Katie. Validation came honestly. Validation comes from, like the people that I'm close to. So like if I get validation from Sheena and Brock and Lala, like that doesn't go unnoticed. And she's like, these are the sweet people, that were sweet to me at the reunion. But even like Lisa and Andy, they were even like, wow, like we all thought that Joe was lying, and then like Lala even was like, holy shit. And Rachel's like, well, I love how Lala called him out. Like he really breadcrumbing you. That's exactly what he was doing. He didn't want to commit in a relationship. You guys were in a relationship, basically doing everything a couple would do together. And Joe's like, everything. Now, this is the part of this interview that I would have loved to have seen Rachel kind of delve into. You're like, hey, when I was with Tom and I would hang out with you guys, I even thought this was a relationship. I want to know Rachel's personal experience with them as a couple. What did Rachel view it as? Or was she so myopically focused on the Sandoval situation that she really didn't notice anything going on outside of her periphery vision? This is where I think, like, God, she was there. She could fill in the blanks on so much more and even potentially help her friend Joe in the process. But also I find it interesting that Rachel is giving Lala a compliment, and I know Lala has given a couple of compliments towards Rachel, the first part of the reunion, obviously. So I find that very interesting. And I would say if I were a betting man, I could see a world in which Lala has Rachel on her podcast at some point or vice versa. But I would imagine it would have to be Lala's podcast. But I'd be curious. And you do wonder how desperate people get. They sometimes make really interesting moves. And I'll be very curious after this third part of the reunion airs to see what kind of moves Lala will be making. So she's like, I don't know how to expand. Okay, let's say you're dating somebody and you go on a date and then you wake up the next day and you were together and then you walk the dogs and then you do like fun activities for a year and a half. I don't know how else you would date somebody. So she's saying, oh, maybe it wasn't said boyfriend and girlfriend, but this is it. We would go on dates. We would like sleep together. We would wake up the next day, walk the dogs. We would do fun activities for a year and a half. So she then is titling that dating somebody. And then Rachel's like, well, also we're talking like we're in our 30s, he's almost 40. So like, and then, Joe's like, so we're committed. And then Rachel says, did you take accountability for staying in that relationship despite Schwartz not putting a label on it? And Joe goes, well, when we were together, there was a label. So this is the thing. This is the dispute here. So she's saying there is a label. He did call her his girlfriend at some point if she keeps hitting this label button. Rachel goes, so in your mind, going into the season, you guys were in a committed relationship, correct? So then how did it feel? And Joe says, well, when he hit me in certain scenes and I was just told to basically like put a single wristband on and then like paddleboard. So that's like, she's talking about that dating thing or this, or like that paddleboard date. So this is interesting. So they went into the season in a committed relationship, but she's still like, the first time we meet Joe, they talk about their situation being somebody that have hooked up in the past, somebody that were close, still close, but just friends. So that is a very interesting thing for me because I feel like I would love to know a little bit more specificity in that. I don't know if it's in the Vanderpump Rules party interview, but that if you guys know, let me know. Rachel's like, be like, yeah, why would you just friends? And Joe's like, well, because I was protecting what I thought was the most important thing at the time, which was the relationship with Schwartz and I just fell in love and I'm an idiot looking back. Okay. Understand how those situations happen. But did you have a very specific conversation with Tom Schwartz going into this saying, hey, he's like, I'd like it if we actually kept that you're still touching my wiener, and that we actually call each other boyfriend, girlfriend. I'd love if that was kept off screen and I presented you more as a friend. Like, did you have that specific conversation? That's what I'm curious about. Because if you did have that specific conversation and then your first, scene on Vanderpump, you're introduced in this whole different way, that's wild. That is really, really wild. And my heart goes out to you. That's wild. Would love to have. And that's why it's so frustrating at these reunions that you can't go into the minutia of it, that Andy doesn't really get in there because they don't have time or whatever, because you really want to know these little pieces of information that would make it so much clearer. Rachel's like, do you regret how many chances you gave him during this filming and him acting one way on camera and another way off? And Joe goes, I don't know how to explain this, but like, I still have a very hard time not like being around him. And she's like, do I regret it? No. Why? I don't know. I still really I've never been more happy, like weirdly in a weird way, like more happy with somebody. But I know this is a very relatable thing where it's like, that person's probably clearly not good for you, but that doesn't mean that doesn't come with emotions. I've never laughed with somebody more and I'm looking for that again. Maybe I should regret it. I don't know if I regret it, but he shouldn't have to have this, but he shouldn't have to have this much weight on my life. But I've never met somebody who just the way that I could see us being old together. Like, that's the thing. It's like minus the TV, minus the show, minus the phones, minus all this bullshit. I love that she's like, minus everything that actually exists in real life, we would definitely be together. This kind of talk right here scares me. And this is where you almost wish like Rachel does like use like therapy terms and all this. Like, Rachel, what you feeling about your friend Joe right here? Could you give us, you're like diagnosing Schwartz. How about diagnosing your friend Joe and what you see? You got to see this very clearly. You've got to you got to have a take on this. And you, above all people, would be able to communicate with Joe in a very different way than anybody else could. So I'm so curious in these moments, what is stopping you from actually having an open conversation about what you view as well? Because you're having open conversations about how you view Schwartz, how you view Sandoval, how you view Lala, but how do you feel about Joe? And I know you love her, but how do you feel about her behavior in this? And is she on the up and up? Because she is literally saying, still with all of this, best time of my life. More happy than I ever was with anybody. And that makes you so fucking sad. And then her going on with like imagine us all together, da 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 da. You're just like, fuck. It feels very junior high when you would allow yourself to, you would be like, oh, you would have very strong, vivid imaginations about like people and futures. And then that gets beaten out of you. And then as you get older, that gets really beaten out of you. She's like, we were so easily compatible, but that's not the case. So I shouldn't have given him so many chances. And thinking about it, I do think what even that means, like, what is giving somebody a chance? If your partner doesn't even consider you, even a partner, if you didn't even consider me a partner, then maybe I didn't even have to give him another chance. Yeah. And these are the kind of realizations that I hate that she's having on a podcast. And I hope she's having these realizations in her real life and away from Instagram lives and things like this, because you're not going to have to live with Instagram lives for the rest of your life, but you will have to live with yourself and you'll have to face yourself and come to terms with some like really hard truths. But obviously, you shouldn't have given him another chance. And the thing was, he probably wasn't asking for another chance. That's the thing too. And that probably made her sad as well, because here's somebody that wasn't begging, didn't want you to be hurt, but wasn't begging for you. And I think that probably led to her continually giving him more and more chances too, because he didn't need them. Rachel says, I think it's important to remember, like, if you're in a situationship like this, like, you are worthy of a loving, committed relationship, and you deserve that. I agree. Don't settle for something less. How did it feel seeing or hearing Schwartz talk about his new girlfriend in front of you? Rachel asks. And Joe says, well, it didn't feel good. But he said, this is going to sound really, really weird, but I remember looking at Katie and she just did not have emotion on her face. I'm like, yeah, that's Katie, duh. And I'm like, wow, I want to get to that point, like not that point, but like, she just didn't give an F about whether or not who he was dating. Shout out to, I will say that it was like the most realistic visual that I've remembered seeing. But I mean, I also felt empowered because he said it finally out loud to the world, because he didn't have the confidence to say it to me. Great. Yes. That's a great realization. But also remember, Katie went through a 10-year plus marriage relationship with this man. So it's also very different. Like that thing really did get beat out of her. And I will say, I do know exactly what you're talking about. You do look at Katie at this reunion and just like, even with the Lala stuff, she's just not phased. She doesn't take the bait. She's just like, yeah, okay, cool. Like nothing truly shocks her anymore. And it is a really interesting switch up or interesting dynamic from Katie, because it used to come off bitter and now it comes off as cool. Rachel says, at what point was it like you were like, shoot, like this is not a relationship anymore? And Joe says, I went to go pick up my stuff and no, he hugged me like with a half hug. It was like a pet pat on the back. Yeah, but Joe, like, yeah, I mean, like if he gave you a full hug, it would then, you'd be thinking about that. Oh, he gave me a full hug at the end. He still but it is sad. Rachel says, do you feel like, because I know you're still hung up on it. Sometimes Rachel could work on because I know you're still hung up on it. I'm seeing it, processing it for sure. I feel like with the show and everything, you're reliving things. So it's harder to move on. I don't know how you did it again. But Schwartz did ask you, like, are you dating anyone? And Joe says, yeah, he asked me at the reunion. He's sitting 2 feet away from me, not even like that 1 foot away from me. And he's like, are you dating? But it was like, no, like, that I'm not dating anybody. And this is another confusing thing about the reunion, because Schwartz acted like she told him she was. So either Schwartz is just bald-faced lying on television, or there was a conversation that she is not remembering now where she did hint at dating somebody else. Either one of those could be true. Schwartz is a proven liar, and I think Joe fudges the truth as well. So anyways, Rachel's like, do you feel like moving forward? And she's like, I'm excited. Yeah, very much. Sadly. I don't feel like I'm ready to date anybody unless I actually get to a place where it just happens. Joe says that it's just for me. It's just like, I could meet somebody like tonight and be like, hey, cause I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm ready to do it with somebody else that's not like a ready or not already. So people think that it's a little in the weeds here, that it needs to be, I need to move on from a certain person before I can get involved with another person. To be honest with you, in reality, I still think about the wonderful moments of other, like there's always lingering moments, right? It doesn't need to be like a black and white thing. When will I find somebody? I know that I will not be potentially 100% over Schwartz. So she's saying, well, she's not going to wait to be fully over Schwartz, but she, when she meets somebody, she's still not going to be over Schwartz. She says, I know that the person that will be with me will help me get there and take it day by day, because that other person too probably has an ex and that's a little bit hung up on potentially. Who knows? I'm excited to see what the future holds. And if that's the right person, they're going to understand my journey, because it's not easy to do. Not only like on my own, but also like on TV. So I don't think that I have an answer for that, actually, because I don't think there needs to be like a cut clean. Everyone thinks that I should be the thing. Everyone thinks that should be the thing, but I just don't. I don't think that I am over Schwartz. No. But my person that probably will come over into my life, he'll be able to understand that. And if he doesn't, then he's not the right person. Oh my goodness, this poor unassuming guy or girl is going to have long conversations about Tom Schwartz at some point in their life. But that's the beauty of relationships. How does it feel knowing that Schwartz is now dating his girlfriend of his publicly, Rachel says. And Joe's like, well, it depends on the day. How I feel about it is, like on a Monday, I'm like proud of him. I'm so grateful that he's doing this, and he's doing it not necessarily publicly or privately, whatever it is. But, I'm like on Monday, I'm like, oh, I'm glad he's happy. I'm hoping he's happy. And then on like Tuesday, I'll be doing hair and something will trigger me. God, can you imagine being one of her hair clients and like she remembers Schwartz all of a sudden and you just get a huge piece of hair cut, like all of a sudden you have a bald spot. She says, I miss him. I'm very grateful that he's happy, because I know when unhappiness comes out, you like a volcano, it shows at the end of the day, at the end of the week. I'm very happy that he's got a beautiful relationship and he's okay. So she's happy. She's proud of him, hoping he finds happiness. Rachel says, I want to commend you really quick because you feel like your emotions really hard. So do I? Yeah, but I have like this ability, which isn't a great thing, to suppress my emotions. And, like feeling your emotions fully helps you heal, and you're not denying anything, and you have the right to feel whatever you're feeling. So I just want to point that out. And Joe's like, thank you, baby. I really appreciate that. Back to the reunion. Yes, back to the reunion. Tom Sandoval says about your relationship with Schwartz, the way that it was portrayed on the show is different than how it was. Would you agree? And Joe said, well, I don't know why he would say that, because he wasn't in the relationship. So I would agree with him personally. How you saw the relationship on the show is not how it actually was in real life. And, Rachel's like, that makes sense. She's like, I was thinking, like, why would you speak on my relationship? I mean, you don't even really know. Well, Joe, girl, I mean, it's a reality television show. That's what they're all there to do. Like, that even though they shouldn't, that's what they're there to do. Speak on things that they shouldn't speak about. Joe's like, but then he kind of put up and pointed at like, yeah, he's right. Yeah, I guess we're going to give Tom Sandoval a point. Like, I would agree. You're right. I just read that question incorrect. But but then he's kind of put up and point that he's like, yeah, I'm a little, anyways, I think other people may have also, because immediately Lala was like, oh yes, she would stop gaslighting. He would stop gaslighting her. It's not the show. It's not on the show. Got a little defensive. It was nice to see Tom Sandoval kind of stick up and be like, guys, by the way, whether or not he was like being kind or not to me, it was almost like his truth was coming out about Schwartz and Joe, the Schwartz and Joe show. Basically, totally. Yeah. And it was nice to see Lala supporting you, Rachel says, to the point it was like, okay, he's gaslighting you. And she was bam, 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 bam. It's literally making you crazy. And Joe says, I looked at Lala. I remember she was across from me and I was just like, oh my gosh. Were you like, Joe, my gosh? Thank you so much. Like I wanted to wink at her. Oh my God, Joe, you should have winked at her. That would have been an amazing meme. Would you blame the show for the discrepancies? And Joe says, no, I blame Schwartz. He had a choice. When Andy asked if Schwartz ever asked you to lie about your relationship during filming, you said no. Great. This is a really good point. Do you still stand by that? And no, why did you feel that you needed to lie for him? And Joe says, I don't know. I think at the moment, I mean, my heart and my soul were still so attached to him, and it was a moment attached to him, and it was a moment of, I'll just sit here, and the quicker I can answer these questions, the quicker I can get off the stage, kind of a thing. If I had said yes, I know that Schwartz would have turned on me, kind of, I just kind of feel that he might have been like, because you could see him being like, think like, oh gosh, oh no, I was doing something out of for him than out for me. That I was doing something for him than out for me. Anyways, do you still feel a responsibility to protect his feelings? And she says, no, I don't. I'm ready to like say out loud to the freaking universe. Yeah, she is. She doesn't feel like she's protecting him. Do you think he takes your feelings into considerations in the same way? She says, no, not even close. He could give two shits about me. I'm sorry to hear that. Rachel says, Joe's like, well, I'm actually grateful because that makes me like get to a place of healing. The reunion wasn't that long ago. What happened between then and now, Rachel says. And she says, well, it wasn't like I was covering up for him or anything. It was more of in the moment when you can imagine you're sitting there, first reunion, the man of your dreams is next to you. Oh, was Ken Todd there? Oh, you mean Schwartz. He's dating a new girlfriend. The last thing you want to do is piss him off. Andy Cohen asked me and said, hey, do you feel like you were covering up or whatever that question was? And I said, no, because in my heart, I didn't think at that moment I was looking back. I definitely was not doing covering up, but definitely being a little not true to myself. So a little wishy-washy there. Would love to know more details. And then now when I'm sitting here talking to you, Rachel, like I get to a place where I'm being able to express looking at something that happened in the past, living it right now in the present, and then going into the future, I'm hopefully saying that I'm over him. I think from that moment you said, no, I haven't lied for him, to the moment that you're sitting in this chair now, you've realized that you've betrayed yourself, Rachel says. And she's like, I definitely did. And yeah, that moment I sat in the chair on the stage and said no, and then sitting here and saying, I wish I could have said yes to Andy Cohen's questions at the reunion. I feel like I betrayed myself. Rachel's like, I understand this was your first reunion. Yes, I understand that. Like walking into a room full of people that haven't supported you and you're like, oh my God, hi. When you walk in on the stage, it's almost all like, all right, here we go. And I don't know, for me anyway, it's like an out of body experience. Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm like literally stepping, like you're looking, I can see my hands and my feet. It's weird. And it's like an airplane taking off, when you're about to like take off in the air and you're like, like, where are my feet? Where are my hands? Am I gripping? I think it's important to talk about how the girls were so mean to you this whole season, Rachel says. I'm thinking back to Hotel Ziggy and them gossiping and giggling. And cut to the reunion we just watched, they are all singing a very different tune. But also, yeah, that's the thing about life too, is that even in situations in the moment, you think differently on them when time passes. That's the beauty of life. But she says she was very uncomfortable with this. It's almost like you're, a 10-year-old and then you're like high-fiving your best friend and then she turns on you and dates like your little cute crush, I'm not sure if I exactly know, but okay. They say all these nasty things and then they come at me at the reunion and then they're like supporting me and you're like looking at them like, I didn't even have your phone number. Joe, it's real. The excuse that they gave for bullying you was that you knew about my involvement with Tom Sandoval. And Joe's like, listen, when you rip me apart at not only a function, aka Hotel Ziggy, and tell me that I'm, I want her to be uncomfortable. I want Joe, she's a rat girl. And then you go 3 months later, that is 12 weeks later, film the reunion. And then you're saying, I'm so sorry, Joe. And from Katie about the way that your brain's not going to compute that. And it's going to take a long time from going from Hotel Ziggy to the reunion where it's these women are ripping me apart and all of a sudden supporting me. Okay, but you're sidestepping the actual fucking question that Rachel asked about the reason why they're being like this. Rachel's like, yeah, I can see how confusing that can be because this whole time you're massively not safe around these people. And Joe's like, I'm not safe around these people. And then it's a switch where all of a sudden, and Joe's like, you see on my face, yeah, like this look of shock. It just seems there's a double standard for the girls. With you, Kyle Chan knew about my involvement with Tom, and they're all supporting him at this finale party. And it just seems like, there's no consequences for anyone but Joe. It seems like the girls are holding you to a higher standard of accountability than the other guys. Now, there maybe is truth to that, right? There maybe is some truth to that. But there's a difference because Kyle wasn't a romantic partner. I don't know. I think sometimes with the romantic partner, also there's, of course, misogyny and all of that stuff. And yes, there's a huge point to that. But also there is something different because I think when we attach a romance or sex to something, it all of a sudden becomes so much more serious and so much more real. And you feel almost it's lascivious and dirty and secretive. So you attach a lot of these negative connotations to this. Kyle Chan apparently is very much close to this group. And, Max is also very much connected, Max Boyens. And then he's up with Katie. And at the end of the day, it was all focused on the female who was dating Tom Schwartz at the time. I kind of agree with this. And it was getting ridiculed and ripped apart. It all amounts to nothing because now they're understanding my perspective. It's like, okay, so now you want to I will say Lala was released. I really think that I don't want to, speaking of Lala, I will say it's okay. So now you want to I will say Lala was, anyways. Lala asks why everyone is gaslighting you about these feelings that you have. It seems like everyone kind of sees your side here. And Joe's like, I think I started crying. I think so you did. You watched it. I feel seen. It's not like they're my best friends. I don't even have their she's obsessed with not having their numbers. I'm just saying in that moment, it's a little bit too late. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I will say this though. If there comes a place where Lala and I would open up a part of my heart to her. So now Joe's putting it out there. I want to talk to you, Lala. I want to talk to you. And I think that might be it because she was really, really sweet. Lala, I will say, presents much differently in person than she does on the show. Very different. Worlds different. Shockingly different. I would have really liked to have more support this season, Joe says, and the only one that did support me, in the female, Ariana was like Lala. And I will say, I'll say she was like my best friend. I don't know. So it gets a little mumbly. So it was nice there that it was a good crumble of a little 25% of support from Lala, where it was thank goodness, because everybody else was who's this rat girl? And it's so sad is that Joe, we're the star of our own lives, right? So this is huge for her, but it was just a small part of the reunion. You broke down when Andy asked Katie about the name calling. Yeah. Why did they hit you so hard? When Andy Cohen asked about the name calling, I was like, here we go. In my mind, I remember thinking, do I go with this pathetic rut? And just in my mind, pathetic would be me just sitting there stoically and being yeah, everything's fine. And it just did not register. And I just felt I was so emotionally sad and it just all flooded out. And then when Katie was trying to deny some of that, the name calling, you held your ground. I did some with tears. You literally mirrored back to her exactly what she said. There's no excuse. You don't get to call me this and the other. You don't get to talk to me that way, Katie. So I felt good about being there's no excuse. What do you think I'm going through? Her excuse was she wasn't supported by many people in this room. She said, it's not about you. It wasn't nice. It wasn't kind. I'm sorry that I wasn't kind. And I'm sorry it wasn't nice. Okay. How are you going to fix that? So they're saying Katie should have done more potentially. And what she said on the part one of the reunion, she said it's intention versus impact. You could have an intention of not bringing this much harm by the way that it's impacted you was insanity. Yeah, but it's hard though, because, intention versus impact, Katie had intention versus impact from you as well. Your intention was to be a friend to all, right? Even when you reached out with her, Bieber loves you, keep your head up, girl. Your intention was to be supportive. Your impact, though, is that you wound up with her ex-husband, and that was highly damaging. So intention versus impact works both ways. It works two ways. And if we should respect it for you, you've got to then open up your possibility of, remember, you started this whole thing in Katie's head. Anyway, so they're going through that, I handled it very well in the end. Katie sort of gives the apology. Do you forgive her for her hurtful words? And Joe says, I do not forgive her. Well, then Joe, girl, maybe think on that a little bit more. Think about that. And I have a feeling she's going to change that answer in a month. Think on that. Truly. Ariana has said that she hasn't watched this season. Are there any moments from this season you wish you hadn't watched back? She says there's a couple moments I feel I wish I would not have watched back. This one really stuck with me where Schwartz and I were paddleboarding because that was real happiness for both of us. The first part of the scene where he comes in with his blonde hair and we have the breakup quote unquote scenes where I'm not doing this bird whistle, Gordo and Butters, and we just have this cadence together. And then I this other part I regret watching was when I was crying at the finale when, Katie, okay, so you regret a lot of your scenes. You should regret that one where you talk about the death of your turtle as a kid. I still think about that turtle on a daily basis. But she says all of this was tough to watch. Obviously she's still into Schwartz, so all of this is probably tough to watch. And then Rachel's like, Joe, thank you for joining me today. I'm so happy to have you back. And just know, that you're hanging in there. And where can we find you? On Instagram, you have some cute merch. So you guys, Joe's shop is Joe My Gosh. Shop Joe My Gosh on her Instagram, Joe My Gosh. And then that is the end of the podcast, folks. That is the end of their podcast. What did you guys think? I mean, we got some information there. I just feel like it is so, disjointed because there's the other side and there's a lot of Schwartz's podcasts, which we're going to do, I think, a YouTube video about. And so I will be talking about Schwartz's side of this. So this is just Joe, and I'll have Joe's words on the Rachel Goes Rogue podcast. Anyways, we're going to call it a day. It's only an hour and 40 minutes in. I got to talking and then it cheered me up. And so I'm like, let's keep talking. So I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday or whenever you're listening to this, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye.